It's no secret that Hollywood produces a lot of bad movies. Big budget fare like Transformers, terrible horrors like Rings, and completely misguided dramas like The Book of Henry are all a dime a dozen, to the point where it takes quite a lot these days for a film to really stand out in an endless sea of painfully dreadful releases. An easy way to gauge just how bad a movie is, though, is to see how long it took before the distributors pulled it from theaters. It doesn't matter if something cost $1 million or $100 million. Sometimes it's better to just pretend it didn't happen at all. And we've already covered 10 of the worst offenders before, but those were only the beginning. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 more movies so awful they were pulled from cinemas. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10. Show Dogs. Show Dogs is the only movie on this list to not only get pulled from cinemas once, but twice within the space of its short theatrical run. After only a week in screens and suffering a critical kicking, distributors decided to take the film out of circulation in response to incessant complaints about a scene that allegedly, quote-unquote, normalized child grooming. Wait, what? Obviously, no filmmaker in the world wants their kids' movie to be associated with those kinds of messages, and the theatrical cut was returned to the editing room to eliminate the controversial scenes. Eventually put back into circulation, the backlash had seemingly overshadowed Show Dogs' fundamental flaw. It wasn't a good movie regardless. Consequently, the flick only lasted a couple more weeks in theaters, given the boot after a cumulative 4.5-week run. Canning it entirely might have been the best move the studio made though, because if nobody can remember the movie, then they probably won't remember the controversy either. Number 9. A Cure for Wellness. Although it's not the worst movie on this list, A Cure for Wellness had all the signs of a major flop long before it released. Though it had a pretty strong cast and was coming from acclaimed director Gore Verbinski, a 2.5-hour R-rated gothic horror that's more focused on melodrama than scares was always going to be a difficult sell. And it didn't help that the movie itself, while ambitious, failed to offer the story or the horror necessary to really appeal to a specific audience. As a result, the movie lasted only 35 days in theaters. Though that's longer than most on this list, it should be noted that it only received a wide release for its first couple weekends, with the movie going from being available in nearly 3,000 theaters to a mere 80 in the span of 1 week. Number 8. Heaven's Gate. Perhaps the most notorious cinematic failure of all time, Heaven's Gate pretty much ended Hollywood's obsession with ballooning budgets and giving directors as much creative control as possible. It also led to the dissolution of production company United Artists, and ended director Michael Cimino's career, ensuring that he would never be able to live up to the hot streak he was on before boarding this passion project. The problems with the film were twofold. Not only did the production run way over budget, and the final cut come in at a whopping 219 minutes, but the end result itself crumbled under its own ambition, not even getting the consolation prize of being a hit with critics. Consequently, it only took a single week lighting up cinemas before United Artists pulled the film entirely. Number 7. Diana. While period pieces, especially period pieces about the royal family, usually do fairly well in both Britain and overseas, 2013's Diana was doomed from the start. Although critics admittedly noted just how hard Naomi Watts was trying to make the film work as the titular princess, the release quickly became one of the most derided of the year, with just about every outlet ready to pounce on not only how terribly handled the material itself was, but how poor the film was regardless of how it approached its main subject. Consequently, the movie never made it past being shown in more than 100 theaters in the US, with the distribution company keeping it in circulation just long enough to recoup costs, resulting in it playing in just 26 cinemas during its third and final week, before being pulled altogether after that. Number 6. Cabin Fever 2016. On paper, a remake of Cabin Fever isn't a terrible idea. Sure, the original flick had its charm, but it could be argued that a great concept was squandered by Eli Roth, well, being Eli Roth, and letting some of his worst tendencies suffocate most of the good concepts the horror was admittedly built around. That would have taken at least a little bit of creativity and filmmaking talent though, two things which IFC Midnight clearly didn't consider when they went into production on their remake. Though a limited theatrical run was planned and did technically go ahead, the abysmal reception and general feeling that nobody really wanted or needed an almost shot-for-shot remake meant that it only showed up in 22 British cinemas for 2 weekends, bringing in $9,000 and then going straight to VOD. Number 5. Geely. One of the biggest cinematic failures of the 2000s and the movie which almost single-handedly killed Ben Affleck's career, Geely ensured that everyone involved would remain a laughingstock in the industry for years following its release. It was so bad that it resulted in director Martin Brest hanging up his hat completely, retiring from behind-the-camera work due to the overwhelming hatred the film garnered. Thanks to that immediate response, which essentially turned the picture into a meme before memes even existed, alongside a huge 81% decline from first week box office numbers to the second, the studio slashed its availability from over 2,000 theaters to only 73 in its third week of release, pulling the film entirely after that final weekend. Number 4. Jem and the Holograms. After Hasbro achieved success with live-action adaptations of their biggest properties, such as G.I. Joe and Transformers, Universal Pictures wanted in on the action, signing a 6-film contract with the studio in 2010. After producing adaptations of both Battleship and Ouija, all eyes were on the studio to see which other famous property would be made next. Out of everything though, nobody expected Jem and the Holograms to be next in line for a big screen adaptation. And to be honest, in better hands, the property's blend of music and fantasy could have resulted in a charming surprise, but from the get-go it was clear the studio didn't have much faith in the project, allotting a tiny $5 million budget, which it didn't end up recouping, for director John M. Chu to work with. After a dreadful opening weekend, Universal couldn't wait to get the movie off their hands, and pulled it completely after 2 weeks of release. Number 3. Revolution. A movie that stars Al Pacino as a man forced to take part in the Revolutionary War after his son is kidnapped by British forces is a premise which, on paper, seemingly couldn't fail. Of course it wouldn't be on this list if that was true, and the movie ended up tanking, primarily because production was rushed to secure a December release date in order for it to be eligible for the next award season. Boy, were they hopeful on that front. The end result itself was so bad, in fact, that it forced Al Pacino to go on an extended break from acting altogether, taking a 4-year hiatus and only returning in 1989's Sea of Love. It initially only opened in 4 theaters, while the studio assessed the damage of the scathing reviews, then releasing the film in even more cinemas the following week, but deciding to can distribution entirely after 16 days on the market. Number 2. United Passions. A film about FIFA, funded 90% by FIFA themselves, was never going to paint the corporation in a negative light. Allegedly, that was the entire point of United Passions' existence though, with the movie being commissioned to transform the image of the organization in the public eye after years of claims of corruption and shady business practices came to define the footballing board. Unsurprisingly then, it was immediately torn apart by critics, not only for its self-aggrandizing skewed presentation of the subject matter, but because even without that bogging it down, it was just a poorly made film. While a bad reception alone isn't enough to get a movie pulled from theaters though, a stroke of pure irony is. The USA release coincided with the 2015 FIFA corruption investigation, ensuring a meager 3-day run in theaters. Number 1. Pimp. Undoubtedly, Pimp is one of the worst movies ever made. The passion project written, directed, and produced by Robert Cavana and also starring Danny Dyer pretty much put every foot wrong, lined with the narrative as ugly as the film's visuals. The script is a mess, the acting is wooden, and the film is shot in such a haphazardly handled way that it genuinely becomes disorientating. Predictably, it was devoured by critics upon release, and the movie was pulled after one single public screening, where it brought in a whopping total box office gross of £205. Yep, you heard that right, not 200,000, £205. Do the maths and assume that the average ticket cost around £9, and that means around 20 people got to see this film in all its glory. Those lucky so-and-sos.
Hey guys, before you go, I just wanted to talk to you about a brand new project that we're going to have starting up pretty soon. It's a brand new channel called That Film Theory, the pace of which is going to be a bit more relaxed and focus on kind of video essays on our favourite cinematic experiences. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then click the screen and go over there. Hopefully we'll see you soon. We're passionate about it, so come support us.